What happens when the most dangerous missions in history are too real to be fiction? Imagine commandos slipping through the night, their stories so classified that governments denied they ever happened. These are the films that turned real SAS and commando operations into cinematic legend. But behind the heroism came censorship chaos and truth buried under propaganda. Let us uncover 15 SAS and commando raid films that actually happened. Number 15, The Wild Geese, 1978. Released as a politically charged adventure, The Wild Geese became an instant cult hit. Audiences saw it as fiction. In truth, it was drawn from real mercenary missions carried out by ex-SAS soldiers in Africa during the 60s and 70s. The story follows a team of hired veterans sent to rescue a political prisoner in a fictional African state, but insiders whispered it mirrored a real covert extraction operation in the Congo led by British and Rhodesian contractors. The film's realism shocked military consultants. Real ex-SAS men served on set drilling actors in airborne assault techniques. Richard Burton and Roger Moore wore authentic British jump gear. Yet the film's realism caused panic. South Africa banned it for portraying mercenaries as heroes. Western governments condemned it for glorifying colonial warfare. Behind the scenes, chaos brewed. Burton's health failed mid-production. Moore clashed with the director over the brutal realism of the combat scenes. The explosions were so close that one stuntman suffered permanent hearing loss. Decades later, the movie resurfaced as a cult war classic, its script now studied by Special Forces historians for accuracy. It was not Hollywood fiction. It was the sanitized shadow of real SAS blood spilled on African soil. Number 14. The Seawolves, 1980. The Seawolves was dismissed by critics as an aging adventure flick. What few knew, it was based entirely on the real Operation Creek. During World War II, retired British officers and covert commandos attacked a German ship in the neutral harbor of Goa, India, to stop Nazi transmissions guiding U-boats. The men were civilians, but many were ex-SAS and SOE veterans operating under diplomatic secrecy. The operations files were classified for decades. The film was forced to rename ships and disguise real officers. Gregory Peck and Roger Moore played fictionalized versions of real men whose courage could never be officially acknowledged. British authorities worried the movie might embarrass India, so it faced quiet censorship in Commonwealth nations. Meanwhile, studio pressure forced changes to dialogue and even the ending. On-set tension brewed between Moore and Peck as shooting dragged through monsoon storms. Despite poor reviews, veterans of the original raid praised its authenticity, right down to the outdated weapons and moral exhaustion of men too old to fight, but too loyal to retire. Years later, declassified naval records confirmed the mission's success exactly as shown. A forgotten band of civilians had struck a blow no uniformed soldier dared take. Number 13. The Guns of Navarone, 1961. It looked like pure blockbuster fiction, Gregory Peck leading commandos to destroy Nazi cannons on a Greek island. Yet the Guns of Navarone drew heavily from real operations carried out by the British Special Boat Service and the Greek resistance during World War II. The inspiration came from raids on the Aegean islands of Leros and Simi, where small SAS and SBS teams infiltrated heavily fortified German outposts. The British War Office initially protested the film's production. They feared it revealed too much about still classified demolition methods. Several technical advisors were forced to sign secrecy oaths. On-set chaos reigned. The artificial cliffs built for filming collapsed twice. David Niven nearly drowned during a storm scene. Gregory Peck fractured his ankle mid-shoot. Yet the realism of the underwater demolition sequences was unmatched for its time. The film became an international sensation, but its legacy went deeper. Veterans recognized their own missions disguised under Hollywood glamour. It inspired future commandos to volunteer for impossible missions. Even decades later, soldiers training with the SAS still reference its depiction of sabotage under pressure. When the smoke cleared, the Guns of Navarone stood as more than an adventure. It was a cinematic echo of raids too secret to be acknowledged in their day. Number 12. The Dirty Dozen, 1967. The Dirty Dozen was sold as pulp entertainment about convicts turned soldiers, but the real story hid behind military files marked secret. The film was inspired by a World War II operation known as Project Jedburgh, where Allied prisoners and rogues were trained by the British SAS for infiltration missions behind enemy lines in France and occupied Europe. Audiences saw tough men forced to fight for redemption, yet the realism struck veterans too deeply. The training sequences mirrored actual CS discipline right down to brutal obstacle courses and mental endurance drills. Director Robert Aldrich hired former commandos to teach the cast how to move, breathe, and kill like soldiers. Lee Marvin himself, a Marine veteran, insisted on live explosions instead of safe Hollywood pyrotechnics. Controversy erupted fast. The Pentagon refused to endorse the movie, fearing it glorified war criminals. Several countries censored scenes of the climactic massacre, deeming it too savage for public morale during the Cold War. Behind the cameras, tempers exploded. Charles Bronson clashed with John Cassavetes over creative control. Ernest Borgnine nearly quit after witnessing the level of realism in the live fire scenes. Aldrich later admitted the bloodshed on screen was still less than what his SAS advisors described from memory. Over time, The Dirty Dozen became a dark classic, praised for its moral ambiguity and authenticity. Its message was clear, even if buried under bullets and bravado, that war does not redeem monsters, it only trains them to survive longer in hell. Number 11. Raid on Rommel, 1971. Raid on Rommel arrived to mild reviews, yet the story it told was rooted in one of the most daring real-life missions ever undertaken by the SAS. During World War II, the British Special Air Service staged multiple strikes against German fuel convoys and airfields in North Africa under the blazing desert sun. The movie condensed those operations into one fictionalized assault led by Richard Burton playing a weary commando officer. The plot mirrored an actual SAS attack code named Operation Agreement, a disastrous raid on Tobruk in 1942 that saw catastrophic losses but unmatched bravery. Many veterans recognized it immediately and were furious that the film used their pain for entertainment. The British government denied any official link, yet the weapons, uniforms, and tactics were too authentic to ignore. Filming in Libya under the desert heat became its own ordeal. Burton suffered heat exhaustion twice. Stuntmen collapsed during long takes. Several tanks broke down mid-scene. Universal Pictures tried to tone down the violence, but the director refused, cutting only what the censors demanded. The film quietly faded after release, but among military historians it endured as a flawed yet fascinating time capsule of genuine SAS field tactics. Watching it today, you can still sense the grit and madness of the men who actually faced Rommel's forces in the dunes where history swallowed them whole. Number 10. The Great Raid, 2005. The Great Raid may look like modern Patriot cinema, but it was built on declassified World War II reports, once hidden for half a century. It depicts the daring rescue of more than 500 Allied prisoners from a Japanese camp in the Philippines, carried out by American Rangers, Filipino guerrillas, and British-trained commandos whose methods came directly from SAS doctrine. Every movement in the film came from real testimony. Soldiers crawled for miles through swamps, timed their attack by moonlight, and executed the mission without losing a single prisoner. The authenticity startled even surviving veterans who praised it as the closest portrayal of a true raid ever filmed. Despite accuracy, critics accused it of being propaganda. Some countries refused screenings, calling it too nationalistic. The box office failed, yet its legacy quietly grew through military circles and documentaries that confirmed its meticulous research. Behind the camera, production faced disaster. Typhoons destroyed sets. The crew suffered tropical infections. Actors fainted in the heat of real jungle locations. Director John Dahl refused digital shortcuts, choosing to shoot in natural light to mirror the oppressive conditions faced by the commandos. Today, The Great Raid stands as one of cinema's most underrated war reconstructions, reminding viewers that bravery is not in legend, but in forgotten jungles where silence meant survival. Number 9. The Heroes of Telemark, 1965. The Heroes of Telemark was sold as a thrilling Norwegian resistance adventure, but its icy tension was born from real SAS-style sabotage. The film portrays the mission to destroy the Nazi heavy water plant at Vemork, which was essential to Germany's atomic bomb project. Every explosion, every frostbitten trek came from an operation that truly happened, codenamed Operation Gunnerside. In reality, Norwegian commandos trained by the British Special Operations Executive parachuted onto the frozen plateau in 1943. Their orders were simple but suicidal: infiltrate a heavily guarded fortress in sub-zero temperatures and demolish the plant's vital production chambers without killing civilians. The film mirrors that impossible tension. Kirk Douglas leads as a university scientist turned saboteur, facing both the enemy and nature itself. Behind the scenes, production nearly matched the mission's brutality. The crew filmed in actual snowstorms in Norway. Douglas performed most of his own stunts, crossing icy ravines and descending cliffs that even his double refused to attempt. The Norwegian government monitored every scene for historical accuracy, refusing any hint that might dishonor the real saboteurs who never sought fame. When released, the Heroes of Telemark caused international controversy. Germany refused early screenings, claiming it exaggerated Nazi nuclear ambitions. Britain's War Office was furious that classified aspects of the SOE's operations had been reconstructed so faithfully from public hints and veteran accounts. Yet veterans who survived Telemark quietly praised it, calling it the only film that captured the terror of silent warfare, where one misplaced step could doom all. Its legacy endures not as a war spectacle, but as a cold hymn to endurance. It reminds audiences that the greatest acts of heroism are not always loud. They are the ones buried in snow and silence, where humanity held its breath. Number 8. Where Eagles Dare, 1968. Where Eagles Dare stormed cinemas as pure action fantasy, yet its precision tactics and mountain infiltration sequences were rooted in real SAS methods used during Alpine raids in occupied Europe. The story follows Major Smith and Lieutenant Schaffer as they assault an impregnable Nazi fortress to rescue a captured Allied officer. But here lies the hidden truth: it was inspired by real missions carried out by British and Austrian commandos in 1944 under Project Jedburgh. The screenplay by Alistair MacLean was commissioned directly by producers who had consulted former SAS officers. The film's intricate rope descents, coded radio exchanges, and nighttime drops all came from real reports once held secret by the War Office. Even the fake rescue at the heart of the film mirrors a true deception raid that misled the German High Command. Production chaos nearly derailed the project. The snowbound Austrian Alps swallowed vehicles. Helicopters froze mid-flight. Clint Eastwood refused stunt doubles during the cable car scenes, risking his life on wires suspended hundreds of feet above ravines. Crew members later said filming felt like an actual commando mission, with the cold and fear indistinguishable from war itself. Censors hesitated to approve its release in Germany and Austria, arguing it reopened wounds too soon after the war. Yet the film triumphed at the box office, turning its danger into legend. Veterans recognized the coded details and praised its accuracy, while others whispered it revealed too much about real wartime infiltration training. Where Eagles Dare remains one of the greatest espionage war thrillers ever made, because it was not fiction, born of fantasy, but memory disguised as entertainment. Its snowstorm raids and whispered codes were echoes of real courage carved into the mountains where only eagles dared to fly. Number 7. Attack Force Z, 1981. Attack Force Z appeared decades after the war, yet its story came straight from the pages of forgotten commando history. Set in the Pacific Theater, it dramatized a real-life rescue mission conducted by the Australian Z Special Unit and British commandos modeled on the SAS. The plot follows a team of covert soldiers dropped behind Japanese lines to extract survivors from a downed plane before the enemy discovers them. It was not just another war movie. The film was based on the 1945 Mushu Island operation, one of the most disastrous Allied raids ever. Out of a handful of commandos who landed in enemy territory, only one survived. Their mission failed, but their bravery became legend in military circles. For decades, the story was suppressed due to diplomatic embarrassment with post-war Japan. On set, the realism bordered on masochism. Filmed on location in the jungles of Taiwan, the cast endured leeches, monsoons, and fevers. A young Mel Gibson and Sam Neill played the haunted commandos, their exhaustion genuine from weeks of night shooting. Military advisors, including surviving Z Special veterans, demanded the story retain its historical grit without romanticizing death. Censorship haunted the release. Several Asian markets banned it, fearing political repercussions. Western distributors trimmed violence and changed promotional materials to make it look like simple adventure fare. The truth of the raid vanished under the weight of marketing and silence. But years later, declassified military files confirmed everything. Attack Force Z had told the truth hidden beneath fiction. What audiences saw as heroism was closer to tragedy, the story of men who volunteered for impossible missions, knowing history would never remember them. It stands today as one of the most authentic depictions of special forces sacrifice ever captured on film. Number 6. The Desert Rats, 1953. The Desert Rats was released as a patriotic epic, yet beneath its rousing speeches lay the shadow of true SAS warfare. The film follows a small Australian unit defending Tobruk from Rommel's relentless forces. It was inspired by the actual siege that tested the endurance of Allied commandos and desert raiders who fought under impossible heat and hunger. The SAS had launched raids deep behind Axis lines during that very campaign, cutting supply convoys and sabotaging fuel depots in Libya. Director Robert Wise consulted veterans of those units, including men from the Long-Range Desert Group, whose tactics laid the groundwork for the SAS itself. The gritty trench sequences were filmed using real weapons and vehicles from the North African campaign, many loaned from British museums and collectors who had lived the war. On set, the heat was so intense that actors fainted mid-scene. Richard Burton, who played Captain McRoberts, refused makeup, claiming he wanted the sweat and exhaustion to be real. The production faced censorship from British authorities, who feared the film depicted command decisions too critically, especially the scenes showing exhausted soldiers questioning their orders. Studio executives demanded rewrites to soften the tone, but Wise resisted, keeping the raw realism intact. When it premiered, veterans wept. Critics dismissed it as melodrama, yet to those who fought in the desert, it was the closest any movie had come to their truth. The Desert Rats became required viewing in some military academies for its depiction of morale under siege. Decades later, historians confirmed that certain details of the film, including the night raids and supply sabotage, were drawn directly from SAS field reports, still classified at the time. What looked like fiction was the echo of real blood and dust under the Libyan sun, where men fought not for glory, but for survival. Number 5. The Devil's Brigade, 1968. The Devil's Brigade stands as one of cinema's boldest tributes to the birth of modern special forces. Marketed as the American answer to The Dirty Dozen, it actually told the true story of the 1st Special Service Force, a joint U.S.-Canadian commando unit trained under British SAS doctrines during World War II. Their mountain warfare and behind-lines raids in Italy and France became the blueprint for countless SAS operations that followed. The film opens with the formation of a mismatched band of soldiers unfit for conventional combat, transformed through brutal training into an elite strike force. Every detail was historically grounded. The obstacle courses were recreated from real footage of Fort Harrison in Montana, where the unit trained with live ammunition and night assaults under icy waterfalls. Filming pushed actors beyond endurance. William Holden demanded realism, so he trained alongside actual veterans and fired authentic weapons filled with blank cartridges, powerful enough to bruise. Director Andrew McLaglen insisted on location shoots in the Rockies, forcing the crew to hike at altitude carrying real packs. One stuntman broke his leg during a mountain fall that was left in the final cut. The U.S. Army refused to officially support the movie, fearing it romanticized irregular warfare. Canada embraced it as national pride, yet in Britain it was quietly celebrated among SAS veterans who saw their own origins reflected in the chaos. The Devil's Brigade became a modest hit, then vanished into cult status, only to be rediscovered decades later by historians tracing the evolution of Allied commando warfare. Its authenticity continues to inspire modern special operations soldiers who recognize in its story the birth of everything they are trained to be: ruthless, efficient, and utterly unseen. Number 4. The Cockleshell Heroes, 1955. The Cockleshell Heroes may look like an old-fashioned war drama, yet every frame carries the truth of one of the most dangerous commando missions in history. The film recounts Operation Frankton, a real World War II raid led by British Royal Marines who paddled canoes up the Gironde estuary to attack German ships docked at Bordeaux. Most never returned alive. The mission itself was shrouded in secrecy for years, its files classified until long after the war. Director Jose Ferrer worked closely with surviving veterans to ensure accuracy, but tensions grew between filmmakers and the Admiralty, which demanded alterations to hide classified navigation details. Despite those restrictions, the film captures the unbearable isolation of men drifting silently through mined waters, knowing discovery meant death. Production took place under authentic coastal conditions. Actors trained in real canoes until their hands blistered raw. The tide scenes were filmed on the English Channel, where cold waves battered the boats into splinters. Ferrer refused studio tanks, insisting on nature's cruelty to mirror the true ordeal of the Marines. Censors initially blocked the movie in several countries, citing its grim ending. Audiences were not ready for the idea that heroes could die without glory. Yet among veterans, it became sacred. They saw in its quiet tragedy the essence of what the SAS and Commando creed truly meant: courage without witness sacrifice, without applause. Over time, the Cockleshell Heroes was recognized as a cornerstone of British war cinema and the first movie to bring the world of small-team raids to the screen. It laid the foundation for every special operations film that followed. Behind its humble tone lies a truth more chilling than fiction: victory bought by men whose graves the sea still guards. Number 3. The Great Escape, 1963. The Great Escape remains one of the most beloved war films ever made, but beneath its entertainment value lies the chilling truth of one of World War II's most daring real operations. It was not just a prison break story, it was a precise recreation of the escape attempt from Stalag Luft III, where Allied airmen, many trained under SAS and SOE principles, engineered their way to freedom. The film opens with a bold tone of camaraderie, but its source material, written by real participant Paul Brickhill, was drawn from classified debriefings. Every tunnel, every code name, every air duct counted the details of the actual escape. Hollywood dramatized it, yet the bones of truth stayed intact. The prisoners really built 3 tunnels named Tom, Dick, and Harry under the noses of German guards. Director John Sturges filmed the story with a level of realism that bordered on obsession. He imported German-built searchlights to mimic the camp's patrol glare and required actors to dig real earth for the tunnel scenes. Steve McQueen's motorcycle sequence, though fictional, captured the spirit of defiance that made the operation legendary. What the film left unsaid was darker. 76 men escaped, only 3 reached freedom. The rest were recaptured and 50 were executed by the Gestapo, an atrocity that still echoes through military history. British censors initially demanded those deaths be softened, fearing public outrage, but Sturges refused, arguing that sanitizing the story would dishonor the fallen. The Great Escape became a worldwide phenomenon, yet its true power lay in what it concealed. It was not merely a war adventure, it was a monument to ingenuity, perseverance, and quiet rebellion under tyranny. The men behind that real escape taught the world that courage could not be confined behind walls nor silenced by gunfire. Number 2. 633 Squadron, 1964. 633. Squadron arrived in theaters as a roaring aviation spectacle, yet the mission it depicted was not fantasy. It was a thinly disguised dramatization of the real Operation Jericho and the later raids of the RAF's 617 Squadron, whose precision strikes against Nazi strongholds were guided by the same daring principles that defined SAS sabotage. The story follows a Mosquito bomber squadron tasked with destroying a German rocket fuel facility hidden in a Norwegian fjord. Though fictional in names, the premise was directly inspired by missions carried out against hydroelectric and Gestapo targets across occupied Europe. Many of those raids were planned in coordination with SAS units on the ground, feeding intelligence and marking targets with signal flares. Filming was as dangerous as the missions themselves. Real aircraft were flown through narrow mountain valleys in Norway at speeds so low that several pilots barely avoided disaster. The Royal Air Force refused official involvement, fearing that reenacting these classified tactics would reveal too much about radar evasion. Director Walter Grauman used ex-RAF pilots as advisors who had flown the original missions. Their advice shaped the choreography of dogfights, making it one of the most accurate representations of World War II aerial warfare ever filmed. Yet, despite its authenticity, some critics dismissed it as patriotic fantasy, missing that it was grounded in unacknowledged truth. Over time, the movie influenced generations of filmmakers and even inspired George Lucas's climactic Death Star assault in Star Wars. But its deeper legacy lies in memory. Behind its heroics lies the echo of young pilots who never returned from real valleys in Norway and France. 633. Squadron captured what they lived for: to strike the enemy and vanish into the clouds before dawn. Number 1. The Eagle has landed. 1976. The Eagle has landed stunned audiences with its audacious premise: a German commando raid on British soil during World War II. Many thought it pure invention, yet the story was built upon real declassified intelligence, suggesting that Nazi paratroopers once plotted to kidnap Winston Churchill during a secret visit to Norfolk. Author Jack Higgins drew from reports of Operation Oak and other Axis commando plans. The film's portrayal of elite German units led by Michael Caine's Colonel Steiner was modeled after real paratrooper formations trained by SS Commando Otto Skorzeny, the man who rescued Mussolini from captivity. British intelligence later confirmed that similar infiltration tactics were studied by the SAS themselves as countermeasures. Filming the story was its own covert mission. Pinewood Studios feared political backlash, so production shifted between England and Ireland under secrecy. Locals were unsettled seeing actors dressed as Nazis marching through their villages. Censors demanded historical disclaimers, fearing confusion between dramatization and fact. Michael Caine and Donald Sutherland immersed themselves in military drills under retired SAS officers who coached them on stealth movement and demolition accuracy. Explosions were conducted with live ordnance in rural zones, creating shockwaves that shattered nearby windows. Yet the crew's commitment to authenticity made the illusion real. Upon release, the film faced moral outrage in Britain, accused of humanizing the enemy. But time reshaped its legacy. It came to be seen as a reflection of the dangerous symmetry of war, that courage and sacrifice exist on both sides of the line. The Eagle Has Landed endures as one of the most hauntingly plausible war thrillers ever made because somewhere within its fiction lies the pulse of truth, a reminder that history's boldest raids are never far from the shadows of reality. These films remind us that the line between fiction and classified history is razor thin. Each raid, each sacrifice, each buried truth carried the weight of real men who risked everything for missions denied by their own governments. Which of these operations do you believe deserves a full retelling? Like, share, and subscribe, because the truth still hides in plain sight.